Yeah.
Okay. All right, everyone. This is Shannon Joy Mekeel, author of You Have Arrived, journalist, marketing person, and all around just tired human. But I am really pleased to be joining my dear friend, Occum Woods from Cave Junction, Oregon. The magic of the internet has brought Florida and Oregon together on one stratosphere, and we're going to talk to
Can't
him
get much farther apart.
Yes.
On
So
the
let
con.
me introduce my friend Occum. He is an energetic health practitioner, trauma recovery facilitator, Reiki master, community leader, and certified abundance coach. He has overcome profound adversity, abuse, and addiction, and now lives a life full of compassion, gratitude, and unconditional love. Occum has utilized his wisdom combined with his natural gift of intuition and a connection to divine guidance, cultivated over 2 decades to develop a process called trauma transmutation and soul integration. Occum now supports heart-centered change makers and those on the path of transformation to release the energetic baggage of the past so they are free to create the future they deserve in balance, harmony, and abundance. Namaste, Occum.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
So you and I met a couple weeks ago on the Unicorn Universe, and this wonderful networking group that many of our friends are probably watching will know about what that is. But we have had an opportunity to meet such wonderful people on that platform, and you and I connected. I think you actually sought me out, and we just hit it off. And I am so happy to know you and to get to know what you do better. But I have a really strong desire to know more about what you do. And I know all my friends are going to want to know more as well. So I thought I'm going to just put on my journalist hat and get some information from you and really get down to the heart of the matter about what you do. And I forgot to start my timer. So
As long as you started the recording.
Yes,
I just did an excellent interview last hour and it wasn't recorded. We're both at the end going, that was the best ever.
We are recording. We are recording. So that was your practice run. Yeah. It's wonderful that we have this technology, but so we have 45 minutes. Let's get right into it, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
So Occum, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, your family, why you got into what you do. Just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So where I am right now is I'm a father. I have a son of an 11-year-old son who's on the autism spectrum. So he's nonverbal. And so that actually creates a great deal of a great deal of exploration, learning on a daily basis. I'm also been with my wife for 17 years. And we live out here in the country on a beautiful 80-acre property with the landlord who raises chickens. And so we're surrounded by livestock and surrounded by wildness. And this is how I love living my life. I'm not very much a city person. I really enjoy nature. I really enjoy being able to live off the land and be part of the process of life. And so that's my personal life. And we don't do much. We mostly just stay at home and hang with the kid. We do mushroom hunting. We do nature hiking, going to the pond and the ocean, that kind of stuff. But for my business, what I'm doing right now, which I really, if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have never guessed that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. But as circumstances have provided, I now help people, as the intro said, release the past, right? So I do that by accessing the energy field and utilizing my education in energy work and helping them to help themselves. And so it's really deep and profound work, and watching people's lives change in a session or two is really, really, really rewarding.
So that is amazing. How did you get into this work?
Well, I mean, I think it started in childhood, having been a survivor of sexual and physical abuse and abandonment. And then that led to the drugs and alcohol and violence and criminal lifestyle that led to homelessness and suicidal ideation. And at 19, I was about to commit suicide. And I had this moment of awareness, I guess you'd call it a moment of clarity is what they call it in the sobriety community, where I just was going through my life and I was trying to figure out how I got here. Who could I blame for what I was about to do? And through all the stories, there was a sudden awareness that these are all just stories and they're all just situations, but it's me who's telling the story. It's me who takes away from it. So I had this awareness that I'm not unloved because I was abandoned. I'm actually really strong because I don't need a dad, right? Because I've gotten by without it. And so just these reframings of some of the things, and that really helped me to choose to get off the roof that day. And it helped me to start the journey, which still probably wouldn't rocket ship until I was 30, but I moved to Oregon to get away from methamphetamines, and I jumped on a fishing boat and basically was introduced to these two guys who were like, blew my mind as far as men go. They were this beautiful example of fatherhood and unconditional love that I'd never been exposed to. And I'd say that that was the start of me shifting out of lack mentality and really having that dark time into more possibility. And then fast forward 20 years, I've gotten off meth, gotten off alcohol, cigarettes, beer, other stuff. And then I went to an ayahuasca ceremony. And even the way I was led to that ayahuasca ceremony was incredibly fortuitous and unexpected. And it was definitely a hand of God type of guidance towards the medicine.
Wow.
And so she told me to get back on the healer's path, the ayahuasca. And so that was really the start of my most recent incantation of this healer self, this part of me that's helping people now.
Amazing. So just so people can get some idea of the kind of work that you do, can you give us a couple of cases of people you've helped recently, or some of the more profound cases that you've been a part of?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I got my start in suicidal ideation and drug addiction, right? Because that was the path that I came out of. And so it was literally just started as helping people through what I went through. And so there are several people who will credit me as the fact that like they were going to commit suicide that night if that session didn't work. They tried everything else. They tried the talk therapy. They tried the medication. They tried the meditation. They tried the affirmations. And that's some of the biggest profound changes I've seen is people who come in and literally said, I'm going to kill myself tonight if this doesn't work. And then 4 hours later, them being like, I'm embarrassed that I ever even said that. Like, I can't believe that I would feel so disconnected from what I am now that I would consider that, so that's some of the most dramatic ones. But most recently, some of the more of the higher aspect ones are some like the woman who is a clinical psychiatrist. She celebrates 316 Day. This is the last day of her failed suicide attempt. And she wanted to write her book, but as she was writing her book, she couldn't get it published because every time she edited it, she would get right back into that sickness. She would feel nauseated and headache. And so we were able to process the trauma and the energetic filters that are really influencing that result for her. And by processing that, she was then able to finish editing her book, get it published. It's actually going to be published. It's going to be available 3/16 this year, and it'll be released at the end of the month. But that was just one of the most interesting changes, right? Because she came in like, why can't I write this book? And we come to find out it was really, she'd already processed all the traumas, right? She'd really gone through the work, but she couldn't get rid of the energetic shadows. And so just by illuminating those shadows and releasing them, she was able to finish her book. And then other clients, I mean, it's funny because it's hard to niche down because so many people, they'll come for different things and they'll leave with something even different than what they thought they were coming for. But a couple of the other examples is like one woman who was, she was just haunted by the thoughts of her father, right? She could not get over the animosity and the hatred that she had for her father. He'd been dead for 30 years. And we did a session on the energy around her abuses. And I think this might resonate with some of your viewers is that the energy came through. It was the first time I'd ever channeled any external entity or energy, but the energy came through and he said, basically, she's keeping me held hostage. This part of my soul that came down to incarnate for what she needed, the role that she asked me to play, she's keeping me trapped in that role. And when we were able to give him forgiveness and release all that, he was able to release back to the actor, right? This is an analogy, obviously, but the higher self of him that allowed himself to come down and be an SOB, and beat her up and treat her the way she did, actually created her strengths. Like she wasn't able to see that through her overcoming those exercises in a way, she was actually able to come out and be this awesome woman who helps people and changes the world. Mm-hmm. And when she was finally able to let go of that shadow, that filter of what she saw him as, she was able to release that part of him back into the source. And now her testimonial says, I finally have a relationship with my father and he's been dead for 30 years. So now she talks to him and has this guide from him. And so it's really, there's no end to what can happen. But so many times what people come for is they're dealing with a chronic problem, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic anxiety, depression.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you and I had spoken previously about this. What are some ways that trauma manifests itself as sickness or disease in the body? Have you had any cases with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually one of the most interesting things is when I first started doing long distance sessions during the pandemic, it went from a normal session to this amazing expanded experience of the energy field. And when I was helping people to process through these childhood traumas, the side effects were amazing. The side effects in the physical body. So first, let me tell you what I understand about why this works, right? And this is what was shown in the ayahuasca ceremony and the dream school that I was in literally about 8 months after the ayahuasca ceremony. Every night was a dream about something to do with past lives, entity attachments, ultimate consciousness, multiple realities. Like, it was just insane for about 6 months after my first session. And so what I was shown and what I've seen to be true through experience and results is that our physical body is the result of our consciousness, our soul, our spirit, condensing down energy into matter, right? And we know this in quantum physics, that we can go from a wave to a particle through awareness, right? And so as it condenses us down, and then we're still 99.99% air, right? Like, it barely has to condense down into matter. But this is so that our consciousness has an ability to interact with this three-dimensional world. Now, as it's doing that condensing into the matter, it goes through our ego field. And our ego field is the space around our body that is consisting of everything that's ever happened to us. Mm-hmm. So everything that's ever happened from the time you're born, usually really till the time you're 7 to 10, is really concrete. And then you kind of build off of that. But basically, am I safe? Am I secure? Am I loved? Are my needs met? These are the primal first things that are coming up. And so if you have an experience in life where you're always fed, you're always held, you're always happy, you don't have to cry it out, no one ever told you, I'll give you something to cry about kind of thing, then you can have this energy, like it's called thought forms. And I love how Gabor Mate talks about it, because he says that trauma is not the thing that's happening to you. It's the thing that happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So it's not the car accident, the physical abuse, the narcissistic parent. It's really the decisions you're making about yourself and others and reality that actually live in the field. And then that acts like a filter or a distortion from the abundance and prosperity and loving balance that is in the universe, comes through those filters. And not instead of, but it has the option. If those filters are high vibrational, if they were programmed under the emotion of joy and love and acceptance, then that's what you get, right? That's the light that shines through that filter, that lens. Mm-hmm. But if you had a life of lack and suffering and struggling and abuse, that light comes in and it's tainted in that lower vibrational. So not only is it reaching our brain, which is a receiver and not just a transmitter. So now we're getting this idea of like, well, because mom was like this, because dad was like this is how people are. Right. So it's informing our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And then we're projecting that out into our reality through resonance. This is what I believe to be true. The universe is always going to deliver you what you believe to be true. Yeah. Right? It doesn't care what you believe. What you believe is what you get. And so identifying that was the first part of how we can change the mindset and the emotional set through the energy. But what I later found out was, and this is actually through, if you've ever read the source field investigation from David Wilcock, he goes into a ton of scientific studies that are very appreciated about the energy body and DNA being made out of light, right? And so there's this example of DNA being destroyed by a chemical process, and it releases photons into the space. And so what I know is that we are light beings. We are an unseen light that travels through and between us. And I believe that the DNA is informed by that light. And so when that light is going through a distortion in the field, like resentment or anger or fear, then it's going to reach our DNA and inform it of lack and fear and disease, right? And that's why you see there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, right? I haven't read it, but I've heard it's very much like what I'm talking about. And that is that there are certain parts of the body that will store certain emotions or be affected by certain emotions. So if you're someone who's very bitter about life and you're very animosity, you will build up an acidic environment in your body and you will get arthritis, and you will get cancer. And if you have anger issues, that's going to show up in the kidney. If you can't let things go, that's going to show up in the bowels. If you have sexual trauma, that's going to show up in the uterus or the gonads. So it literally, there's it's not like a method to the madness, but there's this congruence that is just undeniable, and so some of the things that my clients have had relief of is coming for like chronic shoulder pain. They're about to go in for a surgery. Well, we find out that she's had a life of caregiver, being a caregiver. So she's got caregiver trauma all around her back and her shoulder. We're able to release that. She didn't go in for the surgery. She ended up going salsa dancing that day. 80-year-old lady went salsa dancing instead of getting her surgery.
It's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
Who have lost the eczema, fibromyalgia starts to disappear,
Wow.
goes away. And then the biggest one that still blows my mind is the woman who was able to start walking 2 weeks after our first session. And I didn't do anything for her legs, right? We literally just worked on the first 10 years of her trauma. And she'd been in a wheelchair for 2.5 years. And when she walked into her dialysis, the doctors just about lost their shit because they did not think she'd ever start walking again.
Wow.
And so that's the side effect of doing the energy work and clearing out the energetic toxins. Just like in clearing an environmental toxin, your body will heal if it has the opportunity.
That's phenomenal. So I have 2 questions for you, follow up with that, because a lot of my friends and my viewers are dealing with prostate cancer. What kind of things that happen in a man's life lead to prostate cancer? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting one, because you wouldn't think of it as like necessarily always sexual in nature, but you'd be surprised at how much that prostate gland is responsible for reproduction, and it's part of the gonad system, right? And so if there's somebody that has had their childhood taken away, it doesn't necessarily have to be through sexual molestation, but if you lost your innocence, say you had to start caring for your parents, or you were caring for your siblings, or you had to take care of yourself because one of your siblings was more high needs, right? There's all kinds of things that can factor into it, but it really comes from, in my opinion, the majority of those things come from that what's happening in the preteen to teenage years around your stability, your ability to reproduce, your ability to recreate your reality versus what your parents have put on you. So that's that. And like I said, that's a real gross generalization. So I want to be clear, like it really is individualized person to person to person. And what could show up, like for instance, in the uterus as sexual assault for one person, yeah, it could have started from sexual abuse, but it could also start from that caregiving thing. So it's not always like you have a prostate problem, then this is why. It's more like, you have a prostate problem. Let's examine the energy around that and see what trauma comes up, because it could be something that I don't even know about. And that's what I really love about what I do, is I learn stuff in every session, right? Because I'm not coming from a place of having been overly educated or indoctrinated. I'm in a space of being open to the truth of the universe, the truth from your soul team. And that's where this information comes from. So sometimes someone can come in with the same ailment, but have a completely different cause.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So I want to talk a little bit about your son, because you did say that initial life programming from ages 1 to 7. What did you call that exactly? The 1 to 7?
Well, it's just the general time. I mean, even one of the
Formative
oldest
years.
Yeah, it's a formative years. It's basically when you're learning, like you have to learn how to walk, right?
Yeah.
And while someone is saying, here's how you walk, you also have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn your own personality. You have to learn your interactions with other people. You have to learn what's safe, what's not safe. And these are things that aren't in a curriculum. They are simply observed, right?
Like your brain's still growing and all of that.
Your brain's still growing.
When I'm curious in the context of your fatherhood, because you don't have any other children, right?
I have another son, but he's 23 years old, raised by his mom.
Your youngest, he's nonverbal autistic.
That's
so
right.
Knowing that, you're this, and we talked about this earlier, how I believe, and I've talked to several people about this, that God doesn't give you the child that you don't need. God gives you the perfect child that you need to raise, and no one else is equipped to raise them. And I believe that in my whole heart. So what is your son's name?
Gavin.
Gavin, that's right. So obviously Gavin is yours for a reason. So what has been different for him? And I know that you and your wife know him better than anyone else. So what has been different for Gavin, and how have you had to adjust your parenting to accommodate those formative years for a nonverbal autistic child?
Oh, in almost every way. In almost every way. I mean, when you get the diagnosis of autism, especially lower functioning or higher needs, the playbook's out the window.
Yeah.
And so it really is about what can we do now? How do we adapt to this? And how do we explore this? And his journey has been the spark for my journey, right? Like I didn't go to that ayahuasca ceremony until after he had his diagnosis. And so it was through my desire to learn more and do more and be more that led me on this path. And knowing that now, it really, what I would say, I believe why he came to us is because we are treating this naturally, right? We're treating him naturally through diet, through nutrition, through energy work. And so he has parents that are extra patient, right? Like we have a lot of patience with him. And this is something with the nonverbal autistics. It can be very trying on your energy system, right? Because one minute he can be trying to beat me up and break a window, and the next minute he can just want to cuddle and be loved. And so he has taught me more than I've taught him, I'm pretty sure, you know, but it is super important to me knowing how formidable years are imprinted, that I show up as the best self I can. And I keep myself from getting stuck in the cause of things and become the result of things, right? So instead of being a reactionary person, I try to be a responsible person. I like to have the ability to respond. So having that moment of pause and reflection and what does this mean? What is this happening here? What is, you know, it would be a completely different experience if I hadn't already processed some of my own traumas and my wife hadn't processed some of her own shadow work. You know, it's so easy to let our children's experience dictate or let us believe what we are and how we are. And so the more you're in tune with who you truly are and the more you shed some of your parental stuff that you picked up, right? Because like if I was to raise him the way I was raised, there'd be a lot more physical discipline. I'm not going to physically discipline a child who doesn't understand the concept, you know? Yeah. So those kinds of things have changed, especially having the awareness of how I was raised and my wife with how she was raised and how we want to raise. And so it's conscious parenting. It's not just programmed following, you know, paint by numbers. It really is a conscious effort every moment, every day.
And to be flexible and to do what he needs at the time and stay within the boundaries of safety and guidance and love. So Gavin's a lucky boy. Absolutely. I can't wait to meet him.
Adaptability.
Yeah, for sure. So something that I found really interesting about our conversation we had prior to the interview today was you told me about your father and how you met him for the first time. Was it at 16?
Yeah, I met him once at 16 and then again at my grandpa's funeral for a day. And then on his deathbed was when I finally got to know him.
So can you tell me a little bit about, I don't know if this is too personal or not, but a little bit about why your father wasn't in your life as you were growing up. And then when he reemerged when you were 16, what you learned about him and how that matters to your life's walk.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, there's no such thing for me. I believe vulnerability is a superpower and I believe it's contagious. And so there's no such thing as too much information for me, TMI or too personal. So yeah, basically, I mean, it's a long story, you know, it's an in-depth story. My mom already had several children and they were special needs as well. And so there was a lot of extra chaos in the home. My father then turned to alcohol and drugs. And at some point he was, you know, needed to leave the home. And he went off on his journey. And having been a parent who left my son, right? At the time when I was a child, I just thought I wasn't loved. I thought that he didn't care for me. But as an adult, understanding the restrictions of space and time and finances, I understand that he was probably doing the best he could do the same way I was doing the best I could do, right? And when I met him at 16, I was so 16, I didn't really appreciate what was happening. You know, I was still trying to find weed. Like I went over to visit him in Virginia and my main priority was trying to find some weed to smoke or girls to hang out with, you know? And so I actually didn't understand even at that point how cool he was. It wasn't until, like I said, until his deathbed where I finally found out that he was really a beautiful shaman. He had really done a lot in his life of energy work and hypnotherapy and working with the Native American church and all of these things, you know. And so it was really an interesting experience to learn that about him at a later stage. And then when I went through my awakening a couple of years after his death, I had this moment, and thank God my teacher is such a beautiful, powerful woman. I said, man, I really wish I had gone with my dad. You know, if I had gone with my dad instead of stayed with my mom, maybe I wouldn't have been sexually abused. Maybe I wouldn't have turned to the drugs. Maybe I wouldn't have turned to the violence. Maybe I wouldn't have almost gone to prison when I was 16 for aggravated assault and unattempted murder. You know, like maybe these things could have been different in my life. And she was like, don't you ever do that. I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, don't you ever regret the training that you signed up for. She's like, basically, I don't work with sexual abuse because I've never been abused. I don't work with drug addicts because I've never been addicted. No one wants to hear about somebody or sobriety from somebody who's never been drunk. And no one wants to hear about forgiveness from somebody who's never been raped. And so it's interesting that I didn't get to be with him and be raised with him, but it's pretty clear that I still picked up the epigenetic frequency of him and what he was doing. And that's not to say that he was an awesome guy the whole time, right? Like, he didn't leave my mom and be awesome. He still had a 20-year journey to get to where he was before he died, you know? And so just that awareness that he really started his business, his healing journey at 30, you know? And so that's where I really got a lot of gratitude and appreciation that it's never too late to start. And so I could start my journey there too. And part of my soul team, like literally as we're talking about him, I can feel the tingles on my back of him, like patting me on the back and saying, yeah, you're doing it, you know? And so I call him into my team all the time.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful story. So, you know, the where matters. I know that you live in a beautiful area of, is it Northern Oregon?
Southern
Oregon. So tell me a little bit about why you're there and what the property is like, and maybe we can even add some photos to this video and we could explain kind of where you live and what your grand plans are for that property.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great conversation too, and that could probably go on really long, but I'll keep it short. But yeah, I live in this beautiful area of Southern Oregon. It's not a very big population. I think the population of our county is like 4,400. I don't know. Or no, our town is 4,400. So it's not very big. It's not really big. I mean, we got 2 stoplights, you know what I mean? But I love that. I love I love living on the land. My landlord raises chickens. And so we have a chicken farm here, egg farm, you know, and I love living with the land. I love living with the wildlife just on the other side of the fence, the cougars, the bears, the deer, you know, and the skunks and the possums, and then having the space that we've cultivated in here. And in addition to just being a beautiful property, it's got great pasture land and hillside. And on the top of the mountain is a Native American site where they have this stone medicine wheel. And this is called Indian Hill Ranch because this hill is sacred. And so I have this beautiful vision of wanting to serve, right? Like, my goal is to serve as many people as possible. And right now I do long distance sessions. So I have clients all over the world. I have clients in Middle Asia and Asia and Australia and Canada. But I would really love to make a place where people can come to me, right? And I had this dream when I was younger about a learning center where, like, okay, if I can't travel to see like the Deepak Chakras and the Dan Millmans and the Bruce Liptons and the Joe Dispenzas, maybe I can build a place and get them to come and teach here, you know? And that has kind of bloomed into, I'd like it to be like a Disneyland of healing. You know, I'd like to have a retreat and sacred space where we could do sweat lodges and plant medicine ceremonies or sacred ceremonies, or just a place where you could have a bitchin' wedding venue, you know? And so, like, living with the land, yurts or small buildings, there's just so much possibility and potential here. And I feel the desire, I feel the urge, and I've even gotten, you know, card readings and Akashic readings that say that's what this property is supposed to be. It's supposed to be something to create a healing vortex in this area and bring jobs to the area as well.
Wow, it's fascinating. So yeah, we love Oregon. I spent a long time in the inland Northwest, so I get the beauty, I get the seasons. It's a beautiful place. So
yeah, it's majestic. There's 1,000 colors of green. You know, I came from the desert where there's 1,000 colors of sand, but here it's like green, insane. And there's rivers and mountains and ponds and ocean, and you can be anywhere within an hour. You can be in a completely different microclimate. So amazing.
It's fantastic. So we have about 15 minutes left. I think we've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about your 2024 goals. I don't know if you have anything set in stone. It's still close to the beginning of the year. So is there anything in particular that you've envisioned for your year?
Yeah, I mean, I've already started a bit. This is part of it. You know, I want to be more visible. And so my goal is to be on podcasts and stages. And so to initiate that, I've gotten several podcasts scheduled. I've already done a couple. And I'm signed up for this summit that happens on the 4th to the 6th of March. It's the Abundance Now Summit held by Abundance Worldwide. And so I'll be speaking on that. 75 plus speakers over 3 days, covering everything you need from business to spirituality. It's a really powerful space. But in addition to that, I would very much like to do more retreats. And something I'm being drawn to, as opposed to starting my own retreat is like, I really want to be a retreat service person. So I want to come serve the people who are serving, right? The retreat I went to last year was incredibly powerful, but the facilitators were spent. They were spent by the end of the week, and they'd done cacao ceremonies and all these things. And I just saw a real need for the support team to have a support team, that their only goal, like I would be there just to channel an energy to the creators, right? And maybe a little bit to the invitees as well, the attendees as well. But I feel like my real true superpower is supporting people who have greater goals, supporting people. That's why my only niche I can get down to is heart-centered change makers, because it doesn't matter if you're just starting your business. It doesn't matter if you're a millionaire. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO. If you have the desire to change something in life, to help people be better, I want to help you help them, right? And so that's my big goal, is to find out how I can collaborate and support more people on a grander scale. So it's not just a one client at a time situation, right? I really want to make that ripple that goes out bigger and bigger as it goes out. And that's my big goal this year, is to expand into leadership and collaboration.
I think that's very doable. I think that's wonderful. And you inspired me. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we adjourn today?
Nothing that I can think of. Like I said, I've just had that other interview, so I'm like, my mind's all open. But I'd be curious to know, like, in your life, if this is okay if I ask you a question.
Yeah,
I'm curious in what ways, now that you've heard what we do with the energy stuff, I'm curious of what ways have you been able to identify something that was holding you back and shift out of that to create a greater growth for yourself? Have you had, I'm sure.
Well, I wrote a book about it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
Well, in May of last year, 2023, I had a come to Jesus minute, and I just realized that the path that I was on, working as a corporate marketing director, and aligning my principles with their policies, there was a distinct problem with that, because they didn't align.
Yeah.
And I'm a person of my word, and I want to see good done in the world. And I didn't see that from my the corporate entity that supported me. So although they did provide me a good living, and I was able to work from home, the stress of that company was just too much. So I changed gears and decided to not do that anymore. And so I took a leap of faith. And on the day that I resigned, I started my LLC, SGM Consulting Services. And I was already 2 weeks into my writing journey. I do a 30-day, wild writing journey in my book. And, I leave a lot of those raw journal entries in there, because people need to know that vulnerability is a superpower.
Yeah.
So that was really 2023 changed my life in so many ways. And, following your bliss and doing what God has intended you to do. And, if you make these promises to God, watch out, because he will hold you to them. He's like, you're not getting a corporate job. I have applied for over 500 jobs over the last 4 years in the Tampa Bay region. I've literally done everything I could do to find a job, and nobody wanted that. God said no. And so I've rebuilt my life, rebuilt my entire personality, and it feels so real and so good and so true and so very much better to me in my DNA to be this person instead of that person. So I'm very thankful. I'm very blessed. And so, being able to talk to people like you and bring these messages to the forefront, it's everything to me. So thank you so much for being on. You're actually my first podcast. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I think it's going to be a great podcast. You bring an excellent energy. And so I can't wait to see who else you talk to and what else you create. And I love that you're able to see that there was a predetermined path that you were on, but that didn't define you. It doesn't mean that you are failing or not succeeding. You just chose, I'm going to shift and I'm going to do what my heart wants. And that's the healing, right? That's the moving away. And I think that's the important thing to let everybody know, is that you are not your past. You are not your past. I like to say, become a product of your past, not a victim to it. How have the things in your past built you up and calibrated you to be more, do more, and have more, as long as you're willing to leave that path eventually, And so I love that.
A product of your past, not
not a victim to it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. So with that, let's go ahead and adjourn. Thank you so much, Occum. This has been a complete and utter pleasure. Namaste.
Been awesome. Thank you.